Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. And joining me today is Deborah Crowe, who is just down the road in beautiful London, Ontario. Deb is a Fractional Chief Heart Officer who helps organizations evolve their leaders and elevate culture through emotional intelligence, strategic coaching, and heart-centered leadership. Today's Fractional Pros Canada podcast is powered by Fractional Pros Canada, the only Canadian online community for Canada's fractional executives. Join us on our Facebook group. Just search for Fractional Pros Canada on Facebook. And yes, it is completely free to join our community of over 400 members. Deb, great to have you on the Pros Pod.
Thank you so much for having me. It's nice to be here, fellow Canadian.
Yes, absolutely. So I think the first obvious question is you have a very unique title, Fractional Chief Heart Officer. Now, if I didn't know any better, I would be thinking that you're referring to my cardiologist, my heart surgeon perhaps, but in this case, that is absolutely not the case. So tell us, what is a Fractional Chief Heart Officer?
Absolutely. So I can't take credit for the title. I know the first and one and only Chief Heart Officer, and that's Claude Silver, who works for VaynerMedia, Gary Vaynerchuk. And I had her on my podcast 3 years ago, and we've become colleagues and friends. And I said to her one day, when I really look at my coaching practice and what I'm being asked to do, I feel like I'm doing elements of what you're doing. And she said, you absolutely are. And I said to her, can I use that title in a fractional way? Because I feel a lot of us, including myself, do and have been doing a lot of fractional work, but I think the term is relatively new in Canada. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's my kind of intuition at the moment.
I
And so
actually Googled fractional chief heart officer. There are very few results that come up that do not have your name in them.
yes, yes. So isn't that fun? And I've always been an out of the box kind of thinker. So for me, the fractional part of being a chief heart officer is doing what I've been doing for the last 16 years. And that's been executive coaching, leadership coaching. I've been doing some strategic planning. I have the pleasure of working with management right up to C-suite. I have the pleasure of working with teams. And there's all kinds of offshoots from this, but there's no codependency. I'm fractional. I come in, I do what I'm being asked. I almost implement that train the trainer model. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I stay if there's new divisions. I've been doing a lot of merger and acquisition work for one specific client who's global. I think there's a lot of M&As going on around the world. And it's just really lovely to be that external HR partner, which is really, in a nutshell, what a fractional chief heart officer is. I'm not an HR professional, but I've worked alongside of HR, whether you want to call it talent management or within that learning and development, change management. I come in and do my part and I do it well, and then I leave.
All right, now you were doing some name dropping before. We caught that, right? You said you have some kind of connection with Gary V. So tell us what that's all about.
So Gary V's Chief Heart Officer is Claude Silver, and I've had the pleasure of getting to know her and had her on my podcast. Gary created that position of Chief Heart Officer specifically for Claude, and she's been doing it at VaynerMedia for over 10 years. And she has a strong, strong HR background. And the more I talked to her, I realized how aligned we were in what we were doing, being an HR external partner. So she's a wonderful person, and she's a great person to follow for all things Chief Heart Officer.
All right. And have you actually met Gary Vee?
I have not met Gary Vee. I like many others, I know him in spirit.
All right,
And
we'll
I
just
was,
move on then. We just wanted to know if you met him, and then it's like,
I
what's he
haven't met
really
him.
like in
Haven't met him
person?
yet.
But-
I
Okay.
know him vicariously through Claude.
All right. All right. Good stuff. All right. So you've worked with clients not just in Canada, not just in the US, but in Europe as well, right? You have a bit of a global experience. So I'm curious if you've seen any differences, observed any differences, especially in the adoption of fractional leadership around the world. And how do you think Canada compares as a market for fractionals? Are we behind? Are we holding back? Are companies here more reticent to engage with fractionals? Or is it maybe Canadian companies just don't really know about the fractional offering at this point? What are your thoughts?
I don't think we're behind. I think it's what you just alluded to. I think people just hear the term and they're like, what is that? And I think it needs to become synonymous with temp, which we've never seen at the executive level. Normally, when a company's going to bring in an executive, they usually have an outside agency. They do their due diligence. It's a long process. When I was case managing, I used to be involved in that process before the executive was hired, and it was usually stipulated at a minimum salary that would be significantly high. And part of the offer was that they'd be cleared for a medical, and I used to actually arrange those. So I don't think we're behind. I think we're slowly catching up. And you would know better than me as a CMO. We just have some education and advocacy work to do.
Yeah, I guess this is one of those cases where we're typically a little bit behind where things are at in the US market as far as this goes. And it just is what it is. Who knows what the actual reason is? But what the good news is that it means there's a bigger opportunity for fractionals in Canada. I think we're right now kind of like in a hockey stick growth mode as far as that goes. So that's
Yeah,
probably the
I
good news.
agree. And I almost think, again, just reiterating, I think it's in alignment with temp work. And I think it's an opportunity for temp agencies to kind of jump on this bandwagon because it's not new. It is more of a regular strategy in Europe. I can say that. And even in the United States, it is.
Mm. Let's talk about what happens when you're brought in to coach somebody to bring them up to a leadership position, right? Somebody's gotten promoted, but they don't have all the skill set. They bring in somebody like you to kind of quickly get them up to speed on, what the new skills are they're going to need to be an effective manager. Has it ever happened where you've seen that at the end of the day, looking back, hindsight, that person was promoted perhaps too quickly, or perhaps they weren't in the end the right person? They just didn't have the skills to be an effective leader, an effective manager.
I have, and it actually has a name, and it's called accidental leader. And it's all of the above that you just mentioned. It's probably a space that I spend at least 50% of my time coaching. So, one scenario can be I'm asked to work with someone because their leader sees them as having further greatness, and I get them, and they're almost in an anxiety or panic attack, or they're in tears. And they're like, why is Robert moving me away from my lab? Why is Robert taking me away from my data and my numbers? And why am I getting these people? And when I can just be present and empathetic and let them get out what they want to express, I let them know I'm a gift and not a punishment, because it's not conveyed to them that this is a positive, this is a promotion. We see something greater in you. So there is that safety net of not all the skills or agility or emotional intelligence, and that's part of my role. I'm usually asked to take this person, and this is where we'd like to see them be in 6 to 8 months, and I get them there. And that's the fun part, is showing them what they do have, and we build on that. We don't spend a lot of time or space on what they don't have. We build the skills so that they do have it.
I guess there's a fine line also between somebody who has, imposter syndrome versus somebody who actually just doesn't have the skills to
Mhm.
grow into that, management position.
There is, but again, when you can, I think I'll back up and explain a little bit. So, a lot of times I get told or asked by C suites, we've already done X amount, a million assessments on so and so. We know what their personality is. And that's great. I don't believe there's one assessment that fits all. But you're not going to move the needle until you address the behavior. And that's the space that I love to be in. I also do EQ, and I also can do the 360s. But when I can sit with someone and learn how they think about thinking, in my role, that metacognition, I can dig into deductive reasoning. So when a C suite says, why does so and so do this and this and this? I can explain why. And then I'm very mindful of my language. I don't believe in talking about strength or weakness because it has a deep connotation for most people. I use behavior language. There's an over focus here or an under focus here. Let's talk about that. 99% of the times, the skills are lacking because it's something in their personal life. And with that rapport and relational trust that you can get to with your clients as a coach, this is something you gently navigate, and the imposter syndrome will surface. And then it's a habit that we have to work on. And at the end of the day, it's not the skills or the agility to do the job, it's the self worth that they don't have.
So it's all upstairs.
Yeah. And a lot of it's not even to do with work, it's life.
It's that personal stuff that we bring into the workplace for
Absolutely,
better
it
or for
is.
worse as humans.
Yeah, and some people get more than others, and I've had some people say, "Why does my family have so much?" And trauma, loss, and accidents don't have a schedule or a date.
Mm.
And for executives and C-suites and that higher level of leadership as a whole, that's a lot to manage when you already have huge responsibility of just the business acumen that's expected of you on a day-to-day basis.
Now, you're also a professor at Western and you teach emotional
I am.
intelligence, right? What does
Yes.
that what does that look
Yes.
like? If I mean, I think a lot of people have heard the term emotional intelligence by this point, but what would day one of that course look like if I'm sitting there as a student? I have no idea what to expect. Like, how do you teach emotional intelligence?
Well, it's broken down, and it's a lot. It's 4 weeks. I teach online once a week, and then the rest is work in between. But emotional intelligence is being able to manage oneself, but also have the emotions and the intelligence to go with it when you're also with other people. But it starts here. We have to manage our own inner compass and inner leader. So it's really aligned beautifully with heart centered leadership. And I get to intertwine the two as we go through the course. But it's learning things like that have been called soft skills that aren't soft. Empathy, compassion, but it's also when to use assertiveness and how does emotional intelligence align with assertiveness. We can be assertive and say hard things in a kind, compassionate way. It's learning how to pause and have equanimity and not be a reactor. It's learning that when you're angry, anger's the secondary emotion. And when I can teach you what the initial emotions are, if we use the iceberg theory, Anger's at the tip sticking out of the water. The big piece of ice underneath is all the initial emotions that we don't want to show: guilt, anxiety, jealousy, comparison, vulnerability, all the things that we just want to keep inside. But unfortunately, we can say one thing, our face can say another, and our body language can say even something else.
And what's your take on the nature versus nurture debate as applied to teaching emotional intelligence? Is it something that can really be taught, or are there some people who they're just not wired to be emotionally intelligent?
Well, the way I look at that as a prof is I am facilitating a class of professionals who work in professional leadership roles. That's who is in my cohorts. And they're there for a reason and they're there for a purpose. And they're usually asking to take the course. It's not something they've been told they have to take. And they're going to walk away with a whole bunch of new tools in their toolkit, and I'm coaching the whole person. So they're going to be using this in their personal life as well as in their professional role. And there's a lot of aha moments for people.
Are there cases where you have professionals, students who are in the course, not because they wanted to be there, but because their boss told them, you need to work on your emotional intelligence, go take this course?
Absolutely. And I get to know them because they get to take the EQ assessment and they get a half-hour debrief and coaching with me. And that's when I get that one-on-one, and those types of conversations will come out.
But could there
And
be,
it's a
could those
gift.
people,
It's kind of like it's like the accidental leader. It's the same framing. Like, how lucky are you that you're getting to put new tools in your toolkit for life and for your leadership role? It's all in how they choose to perceive it, right?
right? So is it possible that they're just going through the motions? They don't really want to be there, but they know they got to just complete this course, get a good mark, so to speak, to show their boss they, check this box, they get back to the workplace and they're the same, no effect. They just went through the motions.
No, absolutely not. There's different offerings that they have to do within the course, and their assessment is data, and that data is a baseline that I'm working with in that one-on-one session. And it's very methodical and empathetic to gently peel the onion to get to the root of the thought, the feeling, and the emotion. And when we learn our emotions and why we react, that's when we can start the shift to put the tools that we need in our toolkit to utilize them. And the iceberg model is a big aha for a lot of people. They don't realize that it's a secondary emotion. Or I do this all the time. Oh my gosh. There's a lot of aha moments that go on, and they're adults and it's adult learning. So I think even if they don't want to be there, that quickly shifts within the first week from what I've seen.
You must be a really good teacher then.
Well, I've been teaching a long time. I've been at Fanshawe College for 35 years, and I'm still, a lifelong learner. And I believe if we keep learning and being open-minded, and you get the offering within your classes to share some of your own personal and professional experiences as a leader. And I think that's how we align as human beings, is when we share the good, the bad, the indifferent, and people go, me too, right? And I just think that alignment's so special, and it happens every class.
One of the biggest challenging moments for any company is when there's a merger and acquisition, right? An M&A happens, and all of a sudden you have two usually very different companies who are merging into one in some aspect. And there's usually some kind of culture clash, right? And that's one of the biggest challenges. And very often that ends up being the reason why the merger or acquisition didn't work. The business data made sense, but they just couldn't get on the same page culturally. What do you do to mitigate that? If you're brought in and you're like, hey, we're about to acquire, or we just have acquired, what are kind of some of the baseline assessment tools you do right away to understand how big a job you have in front of you?
I don't do anything, and we don't even talk about mitigation. So I'm usually involved with one, if not two of the executives, and then one of the executives from the new company that's been acquired through the merger and acquisition. And what I ask them all to do is a listening tour. Spend time, get familiar. We're not going to be moving at anything, nothing's moving on the chessboard. And when you do a listening tour, it's one of the most powerful things you can do as an executive when you're acquiring a new company, because there's already so much fear and uncertainty from the company that's been bought. These people are thinking, what's going to happen? We're switching under their brand, their umbrella. Are we going to lose our jobs? And I always just have the executives do listening tours. And one of the best people that I saw do this was when Peter Devlin became the CEO of Fanshawe College many, many years ago. And Peter did an 18-month listening tour, and he spoke to everyone, staff, students, contractors, and he didn't change anything. He listened and he gathered information so that when he started doing things, he was making changes based on informed decisions because he didn't rush or change anything. And it's just so indicative of his heart-centered leadership style. And I always commend him on this when I get to see or chat to him because I witnessed it being a prof at Fanshawe for so long. And anytime somebody new comes in, we all have that, underlying uncertainty, what's going to happen. We have our perception, our belief, our judgment. And when we do these listening tours and they say, well, how long? When you do a few, you're going to know how long you need to keep listening or if you've gathered enough information. And in today's landscape, the longer the listening tour, the better, because we don't want to lose any great talent because of fear or uncertainty. We want to ensure that we're gathering information, we're not making any changes. And I have one company that has had 3 in the last year. And it's just been on repeat, like you said, people laden with fear and uncertainty and looking at the world and thinking, well, we're all going to lose our jobs. That's not the case. So when a heart-centered leader can convey that emotionally and express it in an EQ way, we're not changing anything right now. We're going to get to know you. You're going to get to know us and listen. That is the key, is the listening tours.
I suspect that if there's any, CEOs, company owners listening to this, they're hearing 18 months. I don't have 18 months. I think the norm is probably somewhere around that, typical 100 days. First 100 days we'll listen, but after that we need action. So is 18 months typical, and could 100 days be enough?
It's not typical, but you have to think about the company that's being bought. So if the company that's being bought has been run well, it's making, good money, from a fiduciary standpoint, it's healthy, it's stable, it's vital. If it's an IPO, you're going to know quite quickly from the stakeholders and the board. Sometimes you don't need to go in and do the 100 days. That's a rule of thumb for strategic change or planning, or if we've got somebody new coming on board. In one particular case, the CEO of the company that they bought, he was retiring. So it was a beautiful migration. So they were not going to be replacing the CEO because there was someone else on the executive who had been shaped by the retiring CEO. And that COO, which is rare, assumed his place, and then they promoted a manager into the COO. So they were very reflective and proactive, but it all depends. I mean, the M&A is happening because it's a viable company. It's going to bring services or products into this company to make them have larger global presence. But at the end of the day, it's not a one size fits all. There's so many different elements to look at. But the main thing is every timeline's different, and that's something that's discussed before the M&A is even done. So you're not walking into uncertainty.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about your journey as a fractional. And you're a great example of a fractional who wears many hats. You do a lot of things. You got a lot of experience in a lot of different domains. It seems like you've decided to focus on the, branding yourself as the chief heart officer, chief fractional heart officer. Any insights as to how you decided to focus on that one, core branding message, even though you're so good at so many other things?
Well, it was a head of one of the companies that I work for, and the head of learning and development. We were just having an honest, open conversation, and I had just finished a contract with her executive team. And she said to me, I wish I could bring you in as an executive on a part time basis to do this and this and this. And I said, but you can. And we got talking. And that's when I realized I had been doing some fractional work and I didn't give myself the title. And I think when you can give that level of executive presence and really good workflow and not have the attachment to the company, I think it gives me larger rapport and I think it gives me quicker relational trust because I'm external, I'm not part of. But when I am part of, I'm still that external person. I'm non biased. I'm coming in, I'm gathering information, I'm working with different people, and we're able to get the job done. So it was just a really innocent conversation. And that's when I realized it's not being utilized in the US or in Canada as much as it is in Europe. And that's where the question and the conversation kind of derived from. It was one of my clients in Europe. And I said, "But we can do that." And it was new to them, and now they're doing more of it because labor costs are the largest expense for any employer. So if you can bring somebody in, and sure, it's had other roles. We can put the hat of consultant or facilitator or whatever. It's had all kinds of different extrinsic, but this is specifically at the executive level, which I love, and I'm aligned with under the HR umbrella, if you will.
I think your story is rather unique because you were able to find a brand, a title that is unique, and so it sets you apart. But most of us, normal, non-superhuman fractionals, present company included, we're we have a choice of CMO, COO, CRO, et cetera, CFO, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And I speak to a lot of fractionals and I ask them, so what kind of fractional are you? And they don't have an answer for me. They don't have a 3-letter answer. They're like, well, I'm great at this, this, this. I do this, this, this. I'm like, okay, but what, because it's not important for me as a fractional to know what kind of fractional you are, but it's important for your clients and your prospects to know because they want to know. Clients want to put you in a box, right? They want to know that you have the expertise they're looking for and that you've done it before in a company similar to theirs. So by just, presenting yourself as I'm great in everything, it just doesn't work. So what kind of advice would you give to other fractionals who are kind of struggling with picking a label, and how does the emotional intelligence thing play into this? Could there be barriers that are being, holding them back from committing to one title that are related to the emotional intelligence aspects?
I think the umbrella for me is fractional chief heart officer, and then there can be spokes off of that, which there is for me because I can do coaching, I can do facilitation, I can do team building. There's lots of different things, but the clarity has to be there first. So my advice would be they have to do a self audit and they have to trust themselves. If you don't trust in your own self, you're not bringing EQ to anything. And you have to believe when you're expressing who you are and what you do, that confidence has to show through. And it's great to have case studies and, share globally what's going on or wherever your demographic is. Employers like knowing what other businesses are doing because at the end of the day, the sector doesn't matter. We're all in the people business. I am often asked what sector I work in. I work in lots. There's not just one because I work with people. So the clarity for me came when I had that innocent conversation. And I thought this could really be the umbrella to encompass all the services that I'm really good at and what I also enjoy doing because I love working with people, whether I'm teaching at Fanshawe or teaching at Western or I'm on site or I'm on Zoom. It doesn't matter. The connection for me is what I love with people. And I love when people have the empathy and trust for themselves, but also the vulnerability to say, I'm not really good at this, but I want to be good at this. And it's not coming from their boss. When someone can share their level of self-awareness with you, and tell you where they want to go and you get to guide them and be part of that journey, that to me is priceless. But you can't get to where you want to go or have the label, as you said, Robert, unless you know yourself and have that clarity. So it's sitting with oneself and figuring out what you like to do, who you like to work with. That's hard for a lot of people, or even asking them why they're doing it. I don't know. A lot of people can't answer that question.
So yeah, I wanted to double click on the self audit process. So what does that look like? And is that something that somebody can do by themselves, or is it better to find a coach, find a partner, find a friend, talk to AI? I don't know what's the process there to do that.
I think it's personal. Not everybody can afford a coach. Not everybody wants a coach. Introverts like to journal. Some people like to banter back and forth with AI. I again think it's a very personal choice. But regardless of what you choose or what modality or strategy, you still have to start with a conversation by yourself. I don't know if that's in the car, in the mirror. I don't know if that's writing for you. I don't know if it's voice texting. I don't know if it's typing. Whatever it is, you have to ask yourself why you want to do this and what you bring to that role. And that's how you uncover the answers is when you tap into your own self-awareness to say, do I really like this? Do I enjoy it? Why do I want to do it? Does it bring me joy? It's all of those kind of introspective questions that we have to ask ourselves for clarity. And if you're unable to do that, I would suggest getting a life coach or a business coach or an executive coach, depending on where you're trying to get clarity. But it's not something anybody else can answer because the coach or whoever you engage is only going to bring you through a very similar exercise. And it's being truthful with oneself, it's liking oneself, having the confidence and the self awareness to be able to convey it to other people.
So it sounds like the step one is start with why. We'll we'll
Yeah,
we'll we'll, we'll give a little hat tip to Simon Sinek.
absolutely.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about how you, I guess, market yourself. You know, find clients. A lot of your work comes from referrals.
Yes.
So how do you manage to stay top of mind and visible without leaning on, let's call them, aggressive marketing tactics?
Yeah, I'm not a funnel person. I'm not a lead gen person. On May 30th, it'll be my 35th year in business. I've worked really hard to build connection. My definition of heart-centered leadership is honoring your connection with other people. Full stop. Not for reciprocity. Sometimes I meet people, it can be days, weeks, months, years, and then I'll hear from them again and they'll refer somebody to me. I consistently write content without AI. My book has really helped with credibility and my expertise. And I love AI, but it's never going to take place of my own thought leadership. So I love to share and create content. I've got clients off of LinkedIn who've asked me to work with them or their team because of something that I wrote resonated with them. And I have a lot of exposure in different sectors globally. And that's also very helpful as well. So it's kind of in a combination of many efforts.
How often do you post on LinkedIn on average?
Monday to Friday.
That'd be every day, every weekday, Monday to
Every
Friday?
weekday, sometimes on a Sunday, depending. Sometimes if I get an aha moment or I've had a great learning opportunity or reflection, the odd time I'll do a Sunday, but I write 4 to 6 weeks in advance my content.
But that's a lot of content to put out, solid non-AI generated content 5 days a week. That's quite exceptional, I would say.
It's a habit. It's a habit that's non-negotiable, and I don't kind of sway from it because I don't have other, aggressive, as you said, marketing tactics. I also do keynote speaking and have my podcast. So there's multiple different marketing things that I do. And I probably get some of my best work from some of the things that I don't even get paid to do, like when I'm asked to volunteer. And, I went back to my high school last year and spoke, and that landed some work for me. I've spoken to other nonprofit groups. And sometimes it's the conversations that happen with people after the fact, and it's that networking and that building of connection. And yeah, sometimes they come out of spaces and places that I didn't even know they'd come from.
Yeah, that's the best source of referrals, right? The ones that
Yes.
you didn't even know you were quietly, below the radar cultivating, and then when they're ready to sprout, they suddenly pop above the ground, and you see the little stems, and they're raising
Yeah.
their hands, say, "Hey,
Yeah.
Deb."
And that's how I look at posting content every day. I'm planting seeds.
Nice. Now, when you're talking to, let's say, I don't know if you go to networking events, but let's say for fun, you were at a networking event and you were, meeting a whole bunch of people. Are there any specific phrases or something they say that will automatically give you a signal that this could be a good candidate, a good prospect for you?
I never I never go to events with any value or low level thinking of what's in it for me. And I often tend to introduce myself without extrinsically saying who I am. I would say something I did at a luncheon I just spoke at. I asked the name tags to have people's names and then a set like a line, and they wrote something that they loved. So I would introduce myself and say, "Hi, I'm Deb Crowe. I love the color blue." And I usually get really funny looks. And then I ask what they like because I want to get to know them, not what they do. That can land up coming to the conversation innately and organically because I don't like, "Hi, I'm so and so and I do this and I sell shoes. What do you do?" And it, right? So I always bring some candor and humor. We were talking today in class about being a joy multiplier instead of being a conversation hijacker, and why people do that. And I always talk about my children or my grandchildren or something that it's like a moment of joy. And I'm going to give you the opposite. So if I said to you, "Robert, where were you during 9/11?" You could tell me. But I turn that upside down and say, "Robert, if you could tell me a moment of joy that's sitting in your heart and top of mind right now, share it." And that's how I start my classes with EQ. A moment of joy.
Wow. Now, I love the term joy multiplier. I think everybody wants to be joy multiplier. I want to have that on my CV. I want to put that in my LinkedIn, profile at the very top that appears below my name everywhere. Joy multiplier. That's
I
a
think we
great,
should. Let's do
a
that
great term.
today. It's a
Let's do.
great
Let's all. Let's
Who
go
doesn't
change our
want to hang
profiles
out
right
with a
now.
joy multiplier?
And next time you meet me for the first time, my first question, my first intro is going to be, "Hi, I'm Robert. I like the color blue." And then I shut up. I love
Right?
that. I love
It's
that.
fun. And you can say, I love the color blue too, and this is why. And or I love boating in the summer. Where do you boat? And it has nothing to do with you being a CMO and me being a chief fractional heart officer. I'm just getting to know Robert. And that's where relational trust is born.
I love that. Now, I'm guessing that there's a lot of companies who will reach out to you when it's, kind of too late, when there's some kind of crisis going on already. And they're like, "Oh my God, we need to do something." And they find you. Is there, I mean, obviously, I'm imagine you're all for the proactive approach, figure it out before there's a crisis. You see the signs, or maybe you don't as an executive. What's your take on that? I mean, if I'm an executive running a company and all of a sudden there's a crisis, all of a sudden my culture is falling apart. People are just, there's fighting, there's whatever, productivity's down. What are the signs that I could have possibly noticed earlier on that would have tipped me off that, oh, I don't like the way this is going. I need to bring in Deb now instead of,
Unfortunately, that's the space that I live in. I get brought in with the messy. And to me, it's a welcome mat. It's the long red carpet for me to bring heart-centered leadership into that company. And a lot of times it's not the said team or said employee, it's the higher ups that I get to give feedback to. Healthy, vital cultures don't erode from good behavior.
So it's a top down. If there's a problem with among the ranks, among the rank and file, most likely, would you say always, it's because there's a problem at the top and it's trickling down?
Everything stems from the top. That's why there's a hierarchy. And if we could invert that and it was bottom up, we'd have a much different global landscape right now.
So it sounds like there's definitely an opportunity for executives to all make sure they are joy multipliers within their organizations.
Yes. Yes. Very astute of you, Robert.
I'm paying attention. I'm taking notes. I'm taking notes. What's something business leaders still don't understand about people?
Oh boy, we could do a whole show, but I'll give you kind of my top one that I hear all the time. This is so logical and so common sense. Why doesn't Robert get this? Why can't Robert just do his job? What's the problem? Well, you're the messenger. So either Robert doesn't understand, he doesn't have clarity, or he's so scared of you because of your dictatorial leadership that he won't come to you to ask for clarification. So he's going to go back to his office with anxiety and fear and do the best he can with what you gave him. So if you're not heart centered, if I didn't give you clear instructions, I feel confident you'd come back and say, Deb, I got back to my desk and I was looking at my notes and thinking about our conversation. I'm still feeling a bit lost. Can we just go over this one more time? Absolutely we can. And maybe I'm going to notice that you were a little off that morning. And I'm going to have a coffee with you and I'm going to check in to make sure that you're okay. That's what heart-centered leaders do. They recognize when their people are not themselves, and you can hear the emotion being spoken. And it's your role to take the time to ensure there's emotional intelligence, clarity, asking open-minded questions, and also saying, do you understand everything that I'm expecting you to do with your team? And if not, what can I further elaborate on? And take the time and not be rushed. There's such a rush, especially with publicly traded companies, There's always this fiduciary tsunami that's in their face with metrics and KPIs and some companies' EBITDA percentages and EBIT percentages that are completely an untangible reality. And it's not worth your health, whether it be physical or mental. And we are really in a global crisis right now with energy management, with human beings in every sector. And it's very sad to see.
Talk to me about that. Why do you think that is? Is that because of all the instability around us, or is it something else?
I think there's a lot of M&As going on. I think there's a lot of uncertainty. I don't think I know. Um, the US plays a big part in the world, and everything changes on a dime on the daily. So you can either choose, like I do, to maybe watch the news once or twice a week and be informed, but don't let it succumb you and your mindset. Because if I listen to CNN the way I know some people do, I would feel depressed. My uncertainty would probably go to a very bad level. I don't have anxiety, but it makes me anxious because I work too hard to stay in the positive EQ, heart centered mindset that I want to be every day. But we all have different levels of coping, and we all have different levels of workflow and responsibility and who we work with and our lives and all the things. And it's heavy. So that's why I like that joy multiplier. Because when I drop in on my class on a 9 a.m. and I'm, hey, how's everybody doing? And I'm looking at all the little windows on Zoom, I know they need this. And I know I might be a bit too much, but I'd rather be too much than not enough. Because not everyone's a morning person, but I prepare them in the beginning that I'm a morning person, and grab your coffee because at 9 a.m., like I'm on. And that's just who I am. So it's partly putting in boundaries, Robert, so that you keep your mindset good and all the rest has to go. Because holding a positive mindset with heart-centered leadership and emotional intelligence, it's a daily task, and you got to keep the bad stuff out. That's the easiest way to sum it up.
I think one thing we could all agree on is that reading, watching the news is not a joy multiplier.
It's not. It's totally not.
And we should put that on t-shirts and mugs right away. The news is not a joy multiplier. What's your favorite, over the last 35 years, you've got to have some good stories. What's your favorite story, turnaround? Maybe it's a leadership failure that you started working with, you came into in the crisis mode and you turned it around, or you played a part in turning it around. It became a big success story.
I've had two phenomenal executives who immigrated from Africa to the United States, a female and a male, and both from Nigeria, which is a hard place to leave depending on your social, economic, and family status. But both had a visceral goal and belief system and trust in themselves, and could see themselves graduating and doing what they thought they could do in their dreams. So, the female got two engineering degrees and created an amazing product that helps the medical world and pays it forward beyond measure, and has been adopted by the Obamas as an Obama leader. She's amazing. The other gentleman came not from the same social economic, a little bit better than the female, and they didn't know each other. So, of course, I connected them. He was a CFO and was treated very, very poorly in the States by the owner of the company, who was also the CEO, which is not a good mix. And this was a person that it's logical, it's common sense, just do your job. What's the problem? And this gentleman's team loved him. He was so heart centered. And in the middle of me working with him, because I was told to fix him, that was my instructions.
With those words, fix him.
Hmm.
Those were the words. Wow.
Yep. And when I asked the VP of People and Culture, who didn't instruct me to fix him, if I could get a bit more information, the fear that this person had was terrible to the CEO, like so afraid. Everyone was afraid of the CEO. So, long story short, we went through my coaching program. And at the end, he said, I've learned so much about myself. And he said, I think I'm working in the wrong place. And he was so motivated to go back to the dream that he put aside to take the CFO job. He went and did his executive MBA, and now he's in another executive role, but doing what was his dream. And I'm still in touch with both of these people, and they refer people to me. And it was just so lovely to see the self discovery, keeping the dream alive, even if it was parked for a little bit. They still were able to come back around and reunite with that dream and make the changes to get back. And they're connected with people and doing things that now was exceeded their two dreams, which to me was amazing. And then from my medical days, I had a gentleman that got in a really bad car accident. He was an incomplete quad. So, what that means is from the nipple line on the body down, he had paralysis. But from the nipple line up, he had upper extremity function. And he normally, spinal cord people get cupping in their hands, but he had done so much work and was in the trades. He didn't have this. And I returned him to work full time. And I remember everybody involved was like, I can't believe you returned this guy to work. And I'm like, but he wanted to go back to work. So he is now a computer programmer because he loved computers and computers were part of his trade. So we just looked at all the transferable skills that we could bring over into this new version of him. And he drives. We got him a really nice truck and we had it adapted, and he has the arm in the back. So when he transfers out into his chair, because he has two chairs, the one chair can be lifted back into his truck when he's done to get into the car. Like we just did all the things. But I never ever said, what are we losing? What don't we have? It's like, what do you see? What do you want to bring? Just like I did with the two executives from Africa. And this gentleman's still working and thriving. And I often go visit him because he landed up working for a researcher in a hospital. And they are such opposite personalities and they work together like two peas in a pod. Like it was just, but I never saw any barriers. And that's what I bring. I am that joy multiplier. Tell me where you want to go and where you want to be and let's get you there. And it's just fun to be alongside of people and watch them on their journeys. Like it's the best part of my day, every day.
That's a super rewarding. So you're Miss Cup half full, always half full,
Always
never
half
half empty.
full. Eternal optimist right here.
There we go. I heard you mention something a few minutes ago. You said being an owner and a CEO is a bad idea.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what most people think, especially if somebody is a founder of a company. And I mean, typically, I think this is not
This
based on
this
any
was a
data,
very,
but
very large global company with multiple divisions, multiple locations. So I'm not talking about, small practitioner, small entrepreneur. This was what we would call and put under the umbrella of large organization, like huge staff, multiple countries. There just was no separation and a lot of bias, and it was that person's way or the highway. Like there was no negotiation, no EQ. So, in the context of that particular company, and they lost so many great employees because of that person.
so was that a typical case of the founder not being able to let go?
Yeah, control, complete control. Yeah. And not trusting and relinquishing operations to the people that were appointed on his leadership team. He had to be involved, micromanaging at a very unhealthy level.
What message would you put on a billboard for millions to see?
Oh, that's a good one. Soft skills are success.
Soft skills are success.
Because they're often seen as a weakness. Soft skills make up a big part of the emotional intelligence toolkit. 5 years ago, it was one of the top 10 skills needed, and now it's in the top 5. You can't train. You can't train. The technical skills of a job can be trained. What employers want today around the globe is people that can listen and hear people and provide that level of customer service, regardless of your job, your title, where you are on the org chart. Being kind and compassionate to other people, it's a skill, but it's not weak. And now it's in the top 5. So in 5 years, it's gone from the top 10 to the top 5. I think that speaks loudly.
It's a great way to end our conversation today, Deb. Thanks so much for sharing all of this with us and your time. Really appreciate it. How can people connect with you?
Easiest way is my website, Deb Crowe. Crowe has an E on the end. Just means I'm Irish.com.
All right. Thanks again, Deb. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, my fractional friend. See you soon.
All right, my fractional friend. And let's all go out there and become joy multipliers.
Yes.
That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.